Guam Legislature in Guam is back from recess. Welcome back, colleagues. We're continuing this afternoon on second reading. We just completed Resolution 171, so now we are on Resolution number 311-37 COR. Senator San Augustine, you're recognized.
I'd like to move that that'll be set aside.
There's a motion to set aside Resolution 311. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Now we're going to resume with the bills that had been previously set aside. Beginning with Bill number 105-37 LS. Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Buenas and alfre to my colleagues and to the people of Guam. I motion to move Bill number 105-37, introduced by myself, Senator San Augustine, which is an act to add a new Section 4124B3 of Chapter 4, Title 17, Guam Code Annotated, relative to allowing school and village beautification as a student service learning hours. To the third reading file, I ask that I may speak on the bill.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My colleagues, this measure was drafted by students who were my counterparts during the 2023 Island Leadership Day. It was their initiative to increase student engagement within our community and environment. Our public high school students are mandated by law to complete 75 hours of service learning. If this measure passes, our students will be able to do 10 of these 75 hours within our villages by assisting with village beautification and cleanups, and another 10 of these hours with school campus beautification. This ensures our students are involved within our community and their schools. It reinforces the spirit of Inafamali while allowing our students to spearhead the initiative. It is a simple, straightforward measure and ensures our students will easily complete their service learning hours by assisting our community and their schools. Madam Speaker.
Senator San Augustine. On this bill, is there anyone who would like to speak on the bill? Senator Barnett, you're recognized on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to commend the author for the introduction of the measure, which I support. I did have an amendment, and it's relative to an effort I had seen during the pandemic that a local nonprofit had undertaken to put school gardens at different schools. And although I'm not so sure on the status of that, I did want to include on-campus gardening projects as one of the ways that students can earn service learning hours for school campus beautification. So I'm not sure if the amendment was passed out. Okay, thank you. So there it is. It's line 5, page 2. It amends section 2 of the bill to read, beginning with the 9th grade class of academic school year 23-24, each student must complete 10 hours of village island beautification and 10 hours of school campus beautification. And here's where I'm adding in, including on-campus gardening projects. The required 75 hours of service learning hours. I attended Molesto Elementary. I'm not going to say when, but it was a while ago. And I remember fondly the late Mr. Tekenko's class, where we would grow cabbage and eggplant and frioles in the field behind Molesto Elementary School. And so it brought back memories when I read about Guam Sustainable and their effort to bring school gardens into the campuses. And so I definitely wanted to have it included as an opportunity for students to learn to get the service learning hours if they're working on these types of projects. So I ask the support of my colleagues for this simple amendment. Sidos Masi.
On the amendment, is there anyone who'd like to be recognized on the amendment? Senator Perez, on the amendment, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this amendment. In fact, when I was a teacher, I was able to pilot successfully a permaculture course, in which part of that course was implementing school gardens, and I think this is a good complement to promoting that curriculum. In addition to promoting food security for our island, this is a great opportunity as service learning has to be connected to a lesson plan in the school. So there are many ways the school garden can provide multidisciplinary curriculum from math to science to writing and reading comprehension. So I think this is a great opportunity to expand what is learned in the classroom. So I rise in support of this amendment as well as the bill. Situas Masi.
Situas Masi, Senator Paris. On the amendment, Senator Nicholas, you're recognized.
Yay, it's my turn again. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I support this amendment. Sometimes I think, as a school counselor, I remember trying to find ways to allow the students to garner their service learning hours. But this amendment makes that service learning fun. It's going to allow students to get their service learning and have them do it in campus, which was kind of like one of the things that I tried to do as a school counselor, is try to find ways where they could do the service learning in school. And this is a wonderful thing because it's kind of like going back to the basics and allowing students to get familiar with farming and gardening. So it's just a wonderful amendment, and I think this is I can speak for the other school counselors that this is welcome, and I support the amendment, and I support the measure as well, and I congratulate them and the authors of both the amendment and the bill. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the amendment? On the amendment, Senator San Agustin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also rise in support of it. It's about trying to get our students to know how to plant and grow things and start feeding into into the community. And exactly what the other colleagues mentioned, I'm in full support of this amendment.
Thank you, Senator. Is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the amendment? If not, then the sponsor may close on the amendment.
Situas Masi, Madam Speaker, and Situas Masi to my colleagues for rising in support of this amendment. I also wanted to just briefly speak generally on the bill, if I'm able to, that I support it, and I think it encourages...
Why don't we
okay, sorry, ma'am.
Act on the amendment
Thank
then.
you,
So,
thank you.
On the amendment, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, then that amendment passes. You may now continue to remark on the bill.
Situas Masi. Yeah, I just wanted to speak generally in my support of the bill. I like it because I feel like it fosters a sense of stewardship for our island, which is something that many of us older folks may feel, whether accurately or inaccurately, that this younger generation lacks. But I like it. I think that it's a great way for students to meet the service learning requirements while also bettering the environment that we all live in. Situas Masi, Madam Speaker, and again, I thank the author for introducing the measure and for also supporting the amendment to it.
Situas Masi, Senator. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill? Legislative Secretary.
On the bill, Bill number 105-37, as amended by the Committee on Education, Public Safety, and the Arts. Speaker Terlahi, you are recognized.
Situas Masi. The bill, I guess I just wanted to rise with some questions on this bill. Of course, we've had in place, it looks like since 2011, that the requirement of service learning hours, 75 hours each student has to complete during high school. And then we made some exemptions for 2019 to 2020, 2021 to 22, and 2022 to 2023. And I think that was because of COVID. But I guess I just wanted to, if I could ask the author to yield on really what is propelling this bill forward, because the way I'm looking at it, it's we changed what is right now. Sorry, 1 second. Service learning in general, that's the requirement. They're going to complete 75 hours of service learning. But if I'm reading it correctly, and that's why I'd like to ask the author directly, it's changing that to now mean island or village beautification, or campus beautification, as opposed to other types of service learning projects. And if the author would yield, am I reading that correctly? Are we now changing them from a variety of service learning to those that are limited to beautification?
Does the author yield to the question?
Yes, Madam Speaker. All this bill does is it just changes a little bit of the service learning to add beautification, to add gardening. And this is what the students are asking for, because there's a learning process, and that's part of their service learning.
All right, thank you to the author for yielding. Okay, so the bill seems to be mandating that 10 of the 75 service hours will be mandatory in village or island beautification, and another 10 of the 75 service hours are going to be on campus beautification. And I guess I'm just trying to find out why. Like, of course I support beautification, but I feel like for service learning, why aren't we just allowing these students to choose what is their interest? And I think they've been successful so far in pursuing their interests in a variety of ways. Or, are we having a shortage of campus beautification that we have to mandate the students to do it for us? That's I'm hoping that's not our solution to the issues with the facilities. So I don't know, maybe if the sponsor would yield, I'd like to ask that.
Senator San Augustine.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, let's start out with number one. I understand where the speaker is bringing up the issue of the concerns. If you remember correctly, I introduced this bill because it was my counterpart in 2023. The students said they needed to know how to appreciate the maintenance, the beauty of our island, and part of their service learning is that some of our students can't find something to do for service learning. And they said they love to participate, and they've been participating, and said, can we get credit for it? I said, why not? That's why I introduced this. And then with the gardening, that's a learning process also. And let's face it, not like you hear some folks say out there, not everybody goes to college. So with that note, thank you, Madam Speaker. I hope that answers the question in some form or fashion.
Jesus Masi, again to the sponsor. All right, well, I'm just going to say it then. This looks to me like we are mandating that out of the 75 hours of service learning that we've already mandated these students to comply, we are now mandating them that 10 must be on campus and 10 in beautification of the campus, and 10 must be on island beautification. And I guess I'm just not seeing any compelling reason. I think the reasons that I read from the public hearing where they talk about some of the students don't have transportation, well, sure, then the schools should provide opportunity to gain the service learning on campus. They could always engage them in school campus beautification, and that should fulfill their service learning hours. But it's an option, because some of these students we have seen, they're involved in other things off campus, and they've been involved for years, and they're actually, well, this is going to begin with the 9th grade, mandating them now, but I just feel like we've seen successes. I'm trying to remember, the one I just attended recently over at the Micronesia Mall was for, it's the Island Day of Service, AmeriCorps? Yeah, so they go to different facilities. They go to the nonprofits and they work there, and they go to particular projects. And I was surprised actually to learn that they are really dedicated to those things. Some of them volunteer for, to me, very critical services actually that they're being used for, including some beautification projects, some other farming projects like not farm to table, but the other one, Guam Sustainability, I think also has its own AmeriCorps component. But again, I guess I'm just, if the students are having an issue with transportation, then yes, the schools should allow for this service learning to be done on campus. This, to me, will not solve that either, because it's only really mandating 10 hours. So I'm not sure what's the problem with the schools, why they aren't finding service opportunities on schools, or are they not allowing it, you know, and that we have to now mandate it. I guess I just prefer these students, we're already mandating them to do service learning. I'd like to just give them the option still to do it in the way that they find interesting, compelling, and you know, that they would be dedicated to. So that's just my concern. I'll continue to consider my colleagues' remarks, but that's my issue. It's like this mandate. Again, if we want island, if it didn't even seem to be, well, it may be the reason that we feel like our island needs more beautification, so we want to mandate the students to do that. Again, I'm really hesitant to do that. I'm all for beautification, but I just feel like let's allow them to do that. Like, make it be a may instead of a must. They may complete it in island beautification. I think that's already allowed, or they may complete it, you know, on school campus. That should be allowed. I haven't seen the reason why the schools are not allowing that if they're not. And I guess I'd just like to hear further. So thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. On the bill, bill number 105, Senator Lujan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm concerned about mandating such issues. I don't know if, I don't know if the service learning situation is broken that needs to be fixed. I don't think it is. But I want to go back a few years when I was doing radio. I reserved every Wednesday for the Island-wide Beautification Task Force to come in. At that time, it was the Calvo Tenori administration, and at that time, of course, we know that the Island-wide Beautification Task Force is under the auspices, of course, of the Lieutenant Governor. And so whether it was the Lieutenant Governor or his staff will come in every Wednesday and talk about their efforts in Island-wide Beautification Task Force. And quite often, they would bring in students from the different schools in regards to what they were doing. And this was to satisfy their service learning requirements of the schools. And it was a great thing. It was a great thing what they were doing. There were quite a number of students from the different schools over actually the 8 years of the administration. So my question is as well with this in regards to the mandating and having to do as such. I didn't get any indication and even up to now, because I have students that come to the office as well and wanting to try to fulfill their service learning, and we accommodate them. I mean, we're getting into the summertime here as well, and we're going to be having students at our offices for the summertime. I don't know if the system is broken. I don't think it is, that we have to mandate. So, as was said earlier, that they've been given the opportunity, the schools will allow, okay, this will be a part of your service learning if you want to do certain hours of the schools or of the community and all that, we'll count that because it's already counted. If the schools will offer that as part of the requirements to fulfill their service learning hours. But I don't know if I want, again, mandate is a strong word. It's a strong word. It's heavy-handed, I think, at this point. And all indications are the system, the service learning system, is not broken. Yes, we know the schools need tender loving care and cleaning, and we definitely could do a better job. But let's not disguise this and have now the students responsible. Yes, they take responsibility because they go to school there, and they should, of course, take care of it and help in the cleaning. But aside from that, again, a mandate is a strong word, and I prefer that it would be offered as alternatives, again, things that could fulfill your service learning requirement. But I mean, I'll listen to more arguments, and maybe I'll be convinced at the end of the arguments, but I'm not quite convinced at this point that the system needs fixing and that a mandate, because if we mandate this, then this opens the door for, again, something else that would be needed, and then we would mandate that. So it's, I look at it as pretty heavy-handed at this point, but then, again, I reserve to listen to other arguments, and maybe I'll be swayed to be in support of, but at this point, I'm hesitant to say I'm in support of a mandate as such. With that being said, Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Senator Lujan. On the bill, any other speaker on the bill? Senator Taitakwa, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, and good afternoon to my colleagues. You know, I too have reservations about this legislation. Of course, my good senator from Tamuning as well. I agree. You know, mandating is strong, especially when you have students where parents don't have the ability to drive them or pick them up, you know, from a location that they've been designated to clean out outside of the campus. You know, many of these families, you know, their parents work, and it's hard to get leave their work to pick them up, regardless if it's one day, regardless if it's 1 hour. It's difficult. So, I'm pretty sure that the school has implemented different programs in different categories of where a student feels that they want to contribute to. It's about the student really wanting to help with the environment, clean up the environment. It's about a student who would rather go to helping out the medical, healthcare, senior citizens, you know, being able to provide some service there if they want outside. Or maybe it's just that student who loves their school so much that they want to stay on campus and make sure it's cleaned, you know, even paint or, you know, do what they can to beautify their campus. But a lot of them it's because of their parents' ability, and if to be able to pick them up, and we're not sure if the schools are going to be able to provide this transportation, and then you put them in a predicament, and then you put them in a situation where they have to require 75 hours, and they don't complete this. Leave it to the Department of Education. Leave it to the high school or the junior high school that implements that, what best fits the student, not for this body to say what best fits the student. So I'd like to make an amendment to this legislation, a very simple one. It says here, each student must. I think at this time, if we can just change the word to must to maybe encourage. I think encourage might be even better than may, only because we're not forcing the hand of the school to even do that. I mean, encourage just, I'm looking at the author of the legislation, and he puts his thumbs up for encourage. I think that would be the word to use, because we're not, this body is basically showing that the environment is important. And the author of the legislation truly believes that, when you're in an environment that's clean, and then you're in an environment that's productive and safe. And that's the importance of that type of, helping with the cleanup task, and that he's trying to prove here, that if you're in an environment that's clean, it's an environment that you can be more productive and safe. But I think the encouragement would be better. And if you can give me 1 minute to consult with the author to find out what's the best, whether it be encourage or may, I'd like to ask take that moment to change that. And yeah, change must to encourage. So
Is that a motion, Senator? To
Yes.
change must to will be encouraged
If
to?
you can just give me 1 minute, I'm seriously, 30 seconds actually, Madam Speaker, 30
All right,
seconds.
30 seconds,
And-
recess. We're back from recess. Senator Teichgui, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Sorry for that delay. I think it was 45 seconds of a recess instead of 30. But after consulting with the good author of the legislation, I think we came to a consensus that, and if it's okay with this body, without having to write it down for the sake of time, is to strike out the word must on line 4 on page 2, and before that put after student is encouraged to, and then put complete 10 hours of village island beautification.
All right, is there any objection to doing this without it being in writing? If not, then we will proceed. Thank you. And so the amendment is to change the word must in line 4 of page 2 to replace the word must with the words is encouraged to.
Yes, ma'am.
On that amendment, is there anyone who'd like to speak? Senator San Augustine?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm in support of that amendment. And you know, at the end of the day, we're trying to encourage our students to get involved. And this is where we get them involved. Thank you.
Thank you. On the amendment, anyone else? If not, then the sponsor may close on the amendment. She waives closing. I'll say, is there any objection to this amendment? Seeing no objection, amendment passes. Senator Teitzke, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, I thank my colleagues for letting that pass. I think many of us had some reservations regarding this legislation, as well as yourself, Madam Speaker. But like I mentioned, you put a student in an environment that's clean, then you put in a student in an environment that's safe and productive. And that's what we're encouraging, the students to do. And hopefully, they would find that being more of a handout than it is, not a handout, but a lift up rather than a forceful hand up. So I thank you, my colleagues, for that, and support the legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, anyone else on the bill? If not, then sponsor may close on the bill as amended.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In closing, all I wanted to say is I'd like to add all my colleagues, and I'd highly encourage them to vote for the bill, but to add everyone to the bill, because it's all about the students. And I thank you, Madam Speaker, and I ask that this be moved to the voting file. Third reading.
Jesus Masi, on that motion to move the bill as amended by the committee and further amended on the floor. On the motion to add all colleagues as co-sponsors, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. On the motion to move the bill as amended by the committee and further amended on the floor to the third reading, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We are now on bill number 119-37 COR. Senator Sabina Perez, you are recognized.
Since Masi, Madam Speaker, I move to place bill, to accept substitute version bill number 119-37 onto the floor.
If our Sergeant of Arms could ensure that we have a quorum. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, we'll proceed. We're back with a quorum. Senator Perez had made a motion to accept the bill 119 as amended by the committee and substituted on the floor. On that motion to accept this substituted version, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, that motion passes. So we're now on substitute bill 119. Senator Perez, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place Bill 119-37 as amended by the committee and further substituted on the floor into the third reading, and I wish to discuss.
Please proceed.
Bill 119 aims to revitalize the Guam Procurement Advisory Council in order to modernize and institutionalize best practices in procurement throughout the government in order to promote public confidence and achieve best value and service to our community. Bill 119 aims to increase the Procurement Advisory Council's functionality by focusing membership to those who are statutorily and operationally tasked with procurement within the government. The intention is to promote a culture and process of continuous improvement and thus transitioning toward a proactive approach in addressing the procurement challenges within our government. The current statute limited the Advisory Council's work, in which its final report was to be completed in August 2012. However, the Model Procurement Code upon which the Guam Procurement Statute is based states that the Chief Procurement Officer or Policy Office may establish a council to discuss problems and make recommendations at least annually. The substitute bill proposes to focus membership to key procurement practitioners to make recommendations for improvement as outlined in Section 5902 biannually. Some of the current duties include to conduct studies, research, and analysis on all matters relating to the effectiveness, responsiveness, and timeliness of government procurement, including the review and comparison with Model Procurement Code legislation, and consultation with division heads, school principals, and other mid-level managers and end users of government procured goods and services. B, to critically examine the substantive and procedural aspects of the Guam Procurement Act and existing administrative rules and regulations governing procurement, including legal authorities, composition, effectiveness of Procurement Policy Office. To make recommendations and identify methods to address new industries and technologies and financial systems while maintaining the general principles of procurement law. To review statutes and processes for procurement appeals, and to recommend improvements, if any. Bill 119 proposes to add other duties, such as to make recommendations for best practices and standard operating procedures for planned procurement, writing specifications, market research, solicitation, drafting and managing contracts, maintenance of procurement records, and other aspects of the procurement process. To make recommendations for training and/or certification of procurement professionals, including but not limited to developing and updating curriculum, developing online training, such as train the trainer programs, establishing a procurement institute for training. Also to make recommendations for implementing green procurement with the government of Guam under the advisement of the Guam Energy Office, the Guam Power Authority, Guam Environmental Protection Agency, University of Guam Center for Island Sustainability, and other government entities, and to make recommendations for policies and procedures pertaining to procurement that utilize federal funds. Since the Advisory Council last met over a decade ago, the work is unfinished. It is clear now more than ever that improvements in government procurement needs to be addressed on a continuous basis, and it is essential to promote a culture of improvement through a newly revitalized Procurement Advisory Council that institutionalizes the process of reform of government procurement that ensures fairness, equity, transparency, and accountability that is vital to our community. I ask for and thank in advance my colleagues for their support. Situas Masi.
Situas Masi, Senator. On the bill, on the motion to place the bill in third reading, is there any senator who'd like to be recognized? Senator Fisher, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On the bill, if I could, I have a question for the author. I've been looking through the Model Procurement Code, and I'm wondering whether or not this bill was derived from the Model Procurement Code.
Would the sponsor yield to that question?
Because it's not in there.
Yes, the answer is yes. I know in the Model Procurement Code it was more of a paragraph, but I believe when this Model Procurement Code was adapted to Guam, there were changes to it. So that's why we have how it exists today. I know when they did in the past, when they codified it, it was in a different section. So judging by the framework of it, it makes more sense to to place it in a different part. So I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the author give me a citation within the code? Because, as you know, model codes frequently have a discussion of the point and reason for a particular code section. So I'm trying to find that. So I'm just asking for a citation.
Are you asking her to yield, would the sponsor yield to that question?
Sorry, if you can clarify, are we talking about Guam law, or are we talking about the model procurement code itself?
Well, because, oh, I'm sorry. May I, Madam Speaker? Yeah.
Please proceed, Senator Fisher.
Thank you. My question is, because we have in legislative findings and intent, we have said that we are doing this consistent with the structure of the model procurement code. Again, if I'm looking for a pinpoint citation, because I would like to read the comments by the drafters, if it exists. And will the sponsor yield to that, Madam Speaker?
Would the sponsor yield to the question?
Come on, you said it. Thank you.
I need 1 minute to look for the info. Thanks.
Sure, we'll take a 1-minute recess. We're back from recess. Senator Paris.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, yeah, to clarify, the reason the shift in the code is because it mimics what the structure is according to the Model Procurement Code. So, again, this advisory council was basically under the guise of the Chief Procurement Officer or Procurement Policy Office, which is in, so what this does, it moves this council into that part of procurement law where it defines the duties and tasks of the Chief Procurement Officer as well as the policy office, Procurement Policy Office. So that's why it was a better fit. In addition, it models the same structure after the Model Procurement Code.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Fisher, you have the floor.
Thank you. That answers my question, Madam Speaker. Nothing further.
Senator Fisher. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the bill? Senator Teichgui, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker. I attended the public hearing on this, and it's something that is a long time coming, and according to the Office of OPA, former Speaker B.J. Cruz, he fully supports this, as well as President Mary Okada from GCC, as they will be sitting on the board. I asked the question, why was it that it was never active? Because this is not something new, this advisory group. And it was said that because a lot of times when they show up for these meetings, they've already put 16 hours a day of their work in, and now they have, an additional 2 to 4 hours additionally on top of that, to work with this committee. But the frustration lies when they put these advice, have all this advice, and then the attorneys come to testify when it comes to our floors to address, and then everything changes because everyone has different interpretations about the procurement. And then I made a suggestion, then why don't we just follow the federal government, and how their procurement laws and implement that? And the response from the OPA was, well, that's the body's decision. I mean, granted, the federal government, they procure jets and, tanks and things like that, but, it can simplify it for things in this government. I stand in support of this. I'm hoping and encouraging those who are sitting on this committee will continue the good work and try to address some of the discrepancies or inconsistencies in the procurement laws. I did, however, wanted to ask the author of the legislation, just a real easy question on this one. Not too difficult. It's who is new on this advisory committee versus what it was before?
Would the sponsor yield to that question?
Okay, so who's new is the president of Guam Community College. Before it was the UOG president. And the reason for that is in statute, Guam Community College is tasked with ensuring that the modules are taught and that those modules are essential or required to carry out procurement in the government. The other thing is the procurement officer from an agency with a decentralized procurement or autonomous agency. So that is new because I think it's really important to have a space where people that are practicing, government officials that are practicing procurement can share their best practices as well as discuss some of the problems that need to be addressed in a more collective manner. The ones that were eliminated from this board was the compiler, who's not a key part of procurement, and I believe there were others that were deleted. And I think, really focusing it more on a government-centric committee or council is really critical at this time. So I hope that answers the question.
It did, thank you. However, one of the bottlenecks that was mentioned that it didn't work in prior years was because of, the attorneys that would come and scrutinize whatever was brought to this hall. to deliberate on or have a public hearing on, and then things would fall apart. So it made it very frustrating for this group to get together and continue the work when it would just be shot down. So just another question, I'm sorry to ask. Do we have any attorney on the advisory committee to advise them or to have another perspective on what they can anticipate once these rules and regs or these recommendations of change come to this floor, and be able to counteract it before it comes? Is there any attorneys at all?
Yes, the answer is the Attorney General of Guam is still a member on the council. In addition to that, the bill allows for a council, procurement council, should Department of Administration have one, that they can also provide their services to the council.
I thank the good author of Barragata for those answers to my questions, plain and simple, not skirting around it, making it easy for those who are listening today on how we're trying to put this advisory council together to address some of the procurement issues that we have on Guam, and hopefully we can come up something that's very easily understood, but most especially not contradictive from one procurement process to another procurement process. And I appreciate the hard work that she's been doing. And for those who don't realize that this is this one senator who actually, when she came in 35th Guam Legislature, decided to go to GCC to take a procurement class, go through the whole process of it. So many of us look to her for guidance when it comes to procurement, and I thank her for that, this legislation, and ask to be a co-sponsor on this. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, is there anyone who'd like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Barnett, on the bill, you're recognized.
Sidos Masi, Madam Speaker. I just want to commend the good author for this effort. In the short time I've been here as a senator, procurement's probably been one of the most complained about issues, whether it's across the hall in the public hearing room or inside here in the Committee of the Whole. So I definitely support this effort and the reestablishment of this council, and what this, just some of the duties. I know the author had touched on some of it briefly, but I wanted to kind of go over a little bit of what the council would be authorized to perform relative to their duties. Conduct studies, research, analysis on matters relating to the effectiveness, responsiveness, and timeliness of government procurement. To review the legal infrastructure of the government procurement system to ensure the uniformity of law, regulation, and practice. To propose recommendations for the improvement, streamlining, and modernization of the use of best value and performance-based methods as the basis for evaluation of government procurement activities. To review the statutes and process for procurement appeals and recommend improvements. To make recommendations for implementing green procurement within the government of Guam under the advisement of the Guam Energy Office, GPA, Guam EPA, UOG, Center for Island Sustainability, and other government of Guam entities. And so that's awesome. It's going to address a lot of the issues that we have. But, I just would offer that in my time here, relative to some of these complaints we hear about procurement, I'm not so sure if the complaints stem from a lack of understanding of the process or the difficulty that you have trying to steer procurement towards your party when they absolutely shouldn't be on the winning end of a bid. But some of the people who commented on the bill in the public hearing, of course, the public auditor, who would be, if it's this public auditor, the other attorney on the council, they supported the bill. And BJ Cruz wrote, our public auditor, that he supports it because it aims to modernize and institutionalize best practices in procurement throughout the government in order to promote public confidence. It's very important. Our public has lost a lot of confidence, especially when it comes to procurement. And it's even more damaging to the public confidence when we have individuals like the public auditor churn out audit after audit after audit of questionable costs and we don't see any action relative to those audits. So the more we can do to minimalize some of these shenanigans that we see, the better for the people of Guam. And of course, the public auditor supports the bill. He says it's in line with OPA's vision of the government of Guam being the standard of public trust and good governance. The president of the Guam Community College also offered her support of the bill, writing the mandate to make recommendations to streamline and modernize the procurement process for the government of Guam will allow the advisory council to look at best practices and processes in other entities and jurisdictions and make recommendations to adapt proven processes and systems. Simplification and automation of the process will help reduce errors, redundancies, and could reduce the time for the procurement of goods and services without sacrificing the protections in place to safeguard the public's interest. She further writes, there are several highly qualified subject matter experts in the area, such as attorney John Thomas Brown, who literally wrote the book on procurement for Guam, as well as Dr. Jerry Perez, who would be available and considered in helping guide the process. Further, the director of the Department of Administration offered his support for the measure as well, writing, current Guam procurement law is complex and contradictory. Those charged with operating it, the Chief Procurement Officer and GSA staff at an operational level and the Procurement Policy Office at a policy level, often find contradictions in the statute. Current regulations do not match updated statutory changes. Training modules are outdated. In these circumstances, the Department of Administration has no objection to reactivating the Guam Procurement Advisory Council. So the reviews are in, and they're rave reviews, and I just ask the support of my colleagues for this measure. And again, I thank the author for her hard work and due diligence on the issue of procurement, not just in this bill, but generally with all the bills that she's introduced to improve and streamline the process. And I thank her for allowing me to be a co-sponsor on the measure as well. Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker.
Sidus Masi, Senator. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the bill? Senator Shelton?
On the bill, anyone on the bill? Speaker Terlahi, you are recognized.
Sidus Masi, I also wanted to rise in support of this bill. The bill is aiming to do something that, is suppose it has a great goal. That goal is, of course, to get the best recommendations from these members of this advisory council and put those recommendations into place, if they can be put into place by the executive branch, or to send recommendations to the legislative branch for changes. And I want to commend her for the work that she's done, and so they've changed the council slightly, but most of the mandates of this council remain the same. There are some additional mandates added or duties added, but really, almost all of the duties are the existing duties of the existing council. And this is the thing, I guess, that I just wanted to speak on, is that this could have and should have been done. And for many years, or for some years, it was active, and then it was off and on. Then it became very inactive for at very minimum, the last 6, maybe 7, maybe longer years. And so many people criticize our procurement system, but I just wanted to remind everybody that our procurement law was actually based on, and there's a point brought up by an earlier speaker, my colleague, it's actually based on the ABA's Model Procurement Code. That's the American Bar Association's Model Procurement Code. This is what they do in many, many areas of law. They write a model law that all states can use. And so that their goal was that it could be uniform across the board. They're making it easier for the states to be uniform. They're also trying to address, the same issues that all states are going to be finding with their procurement. And so in this case, we did. The previous legislatures adopted the Model Procurement Code at that time, and they made changes based on Guam, which you're supposed to do with all model codes, and that's make it and adopt it and tailor it to your place. So they did that. And I guess there may be some issues with our law, but overall, our law is not the problem. A lot of the problem is in the implementation of the law in an inconsistent manner. And I'm very sure that's one of the primary goals of the author of the bill, is to make implementation of our laws consistent. Not to change from one administration to the next, not to change from one acting chief procurement officer to another acting chief procurement officer, not to change from one agency or autonomous agency to the line agency to another line agency, different. It's to make it consistent, make it fair for all the bidders, to bring value for the taxpayers of Guam. That's the overall goal. And because this advisory council was already in existence, I just want to point out, even the governor in her State of the Island address asked us to revamp the procurement law. Well, this is the method of revamping the procurement law. That would have been to activate your council and get them to do the work. We have now years of decisions from the public auditors who has jurisdiction over procurement appeals. And we can see what the challenges have been, what the protests have been based on. And they could have done an analysis and said, this is where we're going wrong. This is what we've been doing wrong in all these agencies, or this is the consistent protest basis, or this is, the one of the leading protests that we are receiving. And because in the end, everybody just wants to be treated fairly. And if we're going to get value, we have to make them compete with each other on a very fair basis. So I just want to point that out, that this tool has been in existence. There's nothing to prevent them from using it. I'm glad of the changes that we're making to it. We removed some members and put some different ones on for different reasons. But overall, the mandate is the same. We're telling them, take what we've seen so far, take the best practices across the agencies, and make the other agencies use those. And really, we didn't need a council to do that, but it's very conducive and convenient for a central council to collect that type of information and to urge its implementation out in the other agencies. And so that's exactly what they're going to be doing. And in the meantime, they will also be reviewing the statutes where they can find no reconciliation, or that they think there's a better way to do it, then they can make that recommendation. But again, thank you to the author for her work on the bill. Thank you to those at the public hearing. I was there, and I'm grateful for those who testified. Interestingly, they had not been part of the current, they're listed, for example, the OPA is listed as part of the current advisory council, but in his experience, he says this council's never met. So that's my issue. It's like, we could put this into place, but it really takes, a sense of urgency by the Director of Administration, the executive branch, to get this council together and to get them to act. So again, Situs Masi, I support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On the bill, the author may close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Before I close, I would like to add co-sponsors.
Please proceed.
Tello Taitigui, Speaker Therese Terlahi, all the senators that are here, Senator Joanne Brown, Senator Will Parkinson, Senator Tom Fisher, Senator Amanda Shelton. Oh, Jesse? Oh, and Jesse Lujan, and then all of their senators after that, if they don't object to it.
On that motion to add co-sponsors, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries.
So I want to thank my colleagues for their discussion on this bill. I think it's really important to highlight all of those elements, and I appreciate that. I think it was well said that implementation is one of the biggest challenges, and part of that is really providing a space to talk about the problems and to come together for solutions so that we can institutionalize reforms in procurement system. During the public hearing, President Okada stated that, these reforms that we're doing in the legislature are good, but it needs to go further. There needs to be more of a collective effort to ensure that we are bringing our procurement system into the modern age, and especially with computers. I think we're definitely far behind, but I think I have hope that with individuals that are going to spearhead, like President Okada, Public Auditor Cruz, and many others, that I think we have a good mix of individuals that have invested their time into ensuring procurement is better. And I think they want to see this work through, and I definitely want to support those efforts. So I thank my colleagues for their support in this important measure. And I make the motion to move Bill 119-37 as amended by the committee and further substitute on the floor into the third reading file.
On that motion, to place the bill as amended as amended by committee and substituted on the floor and further amended on the floor into the third reading. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're now on bill number 133-37 COR. Senator Sabina Perez, you are recognized on 133.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place the substitute version, Bill 133, onto the session agenda or on the floor.
There's a motion to accept a substitute version of bill number 133. Copies have been passed out. On that motion to accept the substitute version, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Senator Perez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place substitute version into the third reading of 133-37 into the third reading file, and I wish to discuss.
Please proceed.
Substitute Bill 133 aims to expedite the restoration of electricity to renters by allowing tenants to make repairs by licensed electricians to weatherheads following storm damage when the landlord fails to commence or make good faith efforts to commence repair within 10 days following the date that the landlord became aware of the damage. So the substitute bill adds certain safeguards that tenants may deduct the cost only after submitting itemized invoices to the landlord, and the tenant may continue to deduct the balance of the cost for a period not to exceed 3 months. Approximately 80% of households rely on the overhead power supply on Guam that is protected by weatherheads that prevent rainwater from entering the electrical system at the point where the utility service line connects to the building. Repair of weatherheads requires repair by a licensed electrician to ensure that any damage to the system from water entering the broken weatherhead is not also impacting it. Prior to connecting power to a building, GPA crews inspect the weatherheads of every customer. The occupants of structures with damaged weatherheads are immediately notified that the power line is disconnected and the meter removed until the weatherhead is repaired. Advanced repair to the damaged weatherheads can help expedite power restoration. Prior to the enactment of the recent landlord-tenant law, Public Law 34-146, tenants were authorized to make minor repairs when the landlord did not act expeditiously under 18 GCA. Under the recently enacted Public Law 34-146, tenants can choose to either declare a breach has occurred and vacate premises, or take reasonable or appropriate measures to secure essential services if the landlord willfully or negligently fails to do so. In the aftermath of a typhoon, it's questionable if willfulness and negligence exist. Bill 133-37 does not apply to the following: buildings where a licensed electrician, master electrician, or engineer has determined that it is unsafe to restore electricity service until repairs other than the repairs to the weatherhead are completed. It does not apply to buildings where that was subject to water inundation as a result of damaged doors, windows, or loss of roofing parts of flooding, and such building was deemed unsafe by a licensed electrician, master electrician, or engineer until appropriate repairs can be made, or the tenant apparently abandoned the building. Bill 133 also proposes to provide protections to renters who initiate repairs from any retaliation by landlords. The bill is important for tenants. In some cases, landlords don't live on Guam, and we have seen in prior storms that some tenants have been unable to get weatherheads repaired for several months after the storm damage occurred. With prediction that Guam can experience more intense storms due to the effects of climate change, and until we can harden our power infrastructure by transitioning to underground power supply, it is important that we build resiliency by facilitating weatherhead repair and power restoration to our island after typhoons and storms. GPA, DPW also provide written testimony in support of the bill. I ask for my colleagues' support. Sidus Masi.
Sidus Masi, Senator. On the bill, Senator Taitagui, you're recognized on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, when this bill came out, for going through the Committee on Rules process, I reported it out only because I did have some concerns, and I did talk to some of landlords, and I assured them that this is not something that the tenants would take advantage of, because there's mechanisms in place here. And one of the concerns they had was, well, what if the tenant decides to hire an electrician or a contractor that's 3 times the amount of one that's out there in the public, the average cost? And that, is a problem. So we wanted to make sure not only that happens, that they don't get someone to charge exorbitant amount of fees to fix it and repair it. And we've been seeing that around town lately, by the way, trying to find a plumber or electrician or even a contractor. We're seeing that the prices have gone up, and it's not because, of inflation, it's because the lack of. It's very difficult to find an electrician these days, or even a contractor to work on your house, especially the smaller stuff. Unless there's somebody, there are contractors out there who stand ready to build a house, but when you're just repairing something simple, it's very difficult. So, and then I explained that according to the legislation, as long as the landlord makes efforts, toward finding someone, make a good faith effort, which is on section 23, line 23, page 2, commences or makes a good faith effort to commence repair to the damage of the weatherhead within 10 days. Because it was confusing on this one, because 10 days, sometimes these contractors or electricians, you can't get them for like a month because they're already on other projects. But as long as the landlord makes an effort toward that, and it's logged in, then it commences as far as, good faith effort. So we cleared up that scenario. What if the tenant wants to hire their cousin who really is not certified, or just somebody who, oh yeah, I dabbled in that, I took one class, in fixing electrician, and it doesn't fly. I think it's important that, because when it's an apartment building, you have multiple families in there, it can cause more damage to your appliances, your TVs that are, personal property of those living in the facility, and can cause more damage. I mean, we're seeing that right now with all these power outages. Can you imagine having someone work on this power weatherhead that inserts power in there and then blows up your speakers or your refrigerator? So that's the one thing that I had the biggest concern about, because, as you know, I indicated in her report out only, but I was able to have an amendment that could address that. I think it would bring more comfort to know that who's ever working on your weatherhead and providing power to many units in there, that it's not going to blow anybody's refrigerator or air conditioner, that the person should be a certified and licensed electrician. So I have an amendment here. I'm hoping my colleagues have a copy. I'm not sure if they have a copy yet, but it's already written out. I don't see it on anybody's desk, so if you have one moment, it's written out already. We'll just make copies to give to my...
We'll take 1 minute recess. We're back from recess. Copies have been passed out. Senator Taitagui, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I mentioned my concern about the legislation, and I think that this would make us more comfortable knowing that we're looking after both sides, not only the landlord's interest, but us as well as the tenants, keeping them safe. So where this begins is on page 2, line 25. Notwithstanding any of the provisions of this chapter, the tenant shall report any observed damage to the weatherhead and weatherhead posts where the damage is related to damaging or destructive winds, wind speed that exceeds 34 knots or 40 miles per hour, to the landlord or the landlord's contractor, agent, representative, or employee. If the landlord fails to commence or make good faith efforts to commence repair to the damaged weatherhead within 10 days following the date that the landlord becomes aware of the damage, the tenant may, and this is the underlined section, with the services of a certified licensed electrician, and, so that's the inclusion there, and then it goes on to read, at his own expense, cause repair to be made to the weatherhead in compliance with Guam's building and electrical code laws, rules, and regulations. The tenant may deduct the, and this is an inclusion here, reasonable, and that's the inclusion, and then it continues on with costs of such repairs for the next subsequent rental, and it goes on to the very end, ending at payments. So that's what my amendment does, Madam Speaker. And I ask my colleagues to support this because, one, we're ensuring that whoever is doing the work on there is a certified electrician and licensed, and that he does not, is not exorbitant with the amount of cost, going to the landlord or to exorbitant cost to repair the damage. And that's what my amendment does. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the Taitagui amendment, Senator Barnett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just had a question for the author, and it's relative to, I'm not sure what line it is, but it says the tenant may deduct the reasonable cost of such repairs. What does that mean? It's the cost is the cost, or are we trying to avoid a scenario where they're selecting an electrician who's expensive? I'm not sure if I understand that, ma'am. If the author could yield to that?
Would the author yield?
Absolutely. And it's a very good question because the author of the legislation herself had that same question, and I'm sure my colleagues as well. So we did seek legal advice at this point. And it is a word that can be used in law, what is considered reasonable. The same word as that was used to exorbitant is also a word that can be used in law. Exorbitant cost, meaning a huge amount. So reasonable is like if you were to get 3 quotes and what is being charged out there. So if you're in the court of law and there's an amount that's totally exorbitant, they can say that this is not within reason. It's an exorbitant amount. So we did ask that. Okay. Reasonable is used legally in the court of law. So that question was brought up. So thank you for that really good question.
Thank you. Yeah, just I mean, it may be a legal term, but just the way I read it, the tenant may deduct the reasonable cost of such repairs. It just seems subjective. But, I mean, that's off. We ran it by an attorney. Obviously, I'm not an attorney, but I just worry that what might be reasonable for a tenant might not be reasonable for a landlord, especially when we're considering, after the typhoon, like the one we had last year, Mawar, there's actually a backlog of job requests for their weatherhead repair because there was like a shortage of master electricians. So I just wonder I'm not sure if there are any other renters in here, but as a tenant renter myself, I wonder if I were to secure the services of an electrician to repair my weatherhead and get a bill of $1,000, if the landlord would then counter and say, oh, that's not reasonable because I could have got it done from so-and-so for $500. And that's just what I again, with the mind of a renter, that's just what I'm concerned about with the amendment, ma'am. Sido Smasi.
Sido Smasi, Senator.
On
the amendment.
Point of information, Madam Speaker, if I
Please
may.
state your point of information.
Just to, ensure my good colleague bringing up that concern about what's considered reasonable.
Point of information.
Point of information. And that is the definition in legal information through Legal Information Institute. It says reasonable is just, rational, appropriate, ordinary, or unusual in the circumstances. Usual, not unusual, usual. Sorry. Let me read that again.
Sido Smasi.
Okay, so that's basically the definition, and
Thank you. On the point of information. All right. Now, on the amendment, anyone else who'd like to speak on the amendment? On the amendment. Senator Perez, on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I support this amendment because it provides a little bit more safeguards, more clarity, and just, we did confer with legal about reasonable costs. I did raise that issue because it could be a subjective thing, but I think, given any circumstance, what would any person who would try to acquire services, what is that? And usually, what is available at that time, I think that is how they would base reasonable on. In regards to the other parts, services of a certified licensed electrician, I think I would like to proffer an amendment to the amendment. Instead of certified, put master, because there's no certified electrician, there is a master electrician. So changing the word certified to master.
Is there any objection to taking that motion without it being in writing? If not, then we'll proceed. The amendment is to replace the word certified with master. On that amendment, to the amendment, would anyone like to speak? If not, sponsor may close on that amendment to the amendment.
Thank you. Just to also provide some more information, so GPA DPW requires a master electrician to sign off on the work that the repair has been completed, and it meets the requirements of GPA to restore power. So I think, this is an important part in ensuring that the work that's being done is going to promote the expedition of, or the facilitation of restoration of power by ensuring that someone who's qualified to do the work is doing the work. So thank you.
Thank you. On the amendment to the amendment, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, that amendment to the amendment passes. We're back on the amendment to the bill, Senator Taitigui's amendment as amended. Would anyone else like to speak on that amendment? If not, Senator Taitigui, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I thank the good author and those who asked the question about reasonable, which is, according to most attorneys will tell you, it's used quite a bit in law legislation. And if it's not, they don't agree, then that's why they sue each other. So, but I'd like to thank also the author of the legislation for making my amendment stronger, and no pun intended, but two weatherheads are better than one. That being said, Madam Speaker, I thank you so much and ask my colleagues for their support.
Thank you. On the amendment, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, amendment as amended passes. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the bill? Senator Fisher, you may speak on the bill.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I would join with my friend Senator Taitigui's observation. I wouldn't get hung up on the word reasonable or reasonableness there. As she observed, it's the law is shot through with that terminology. What is reasonable? It's often it's in the eye of the beholder. That famous phrase about, I think it was Justice Stewart, who said, I don't know what pornography is, but I know it when I see it. I don't know what reasonable is, but I know it when I see it. And so I wouldn't worry too much about the subjective application of that. What strikes me in the bill occurs on page 4, subsection D. It says the tenant has a cause of action against the landlord for retaliatory measures that include, so this is not an exclusive list, it's just you have a cause of action for retaliatory measures. I'm not real sure what that means. Retaliatory measure for what? What act is it that brings about this idea of retaliation? We have two options. One is opting not to renew a tenant's lease when the tenant has been in good standing throughout the terms of the lease. A landlord, as you know, has given up possession of his property, but he hasn't, or she hasn't given up ownership. They have just transferred possession to somebody else, the lessee. When the lease runs out, that's it. The landlord has no obligation to re-enter the lease, and there can be no retaliation where the landlord merely exercises her right as respect to the property. I don't see how a cause of action would arise. It also says the landlord directly or indirectly increases the lease payments or cost of the lease upon renewal by an amount that exceeds 10%. So what we've done here is we have said that a boost in the rent, the amount that you owe monthly, I suppose, we've capped it. The landlord is now not free to enter into a contract that would increase it as much as 11%. This is a price control. It's the first time I've seen something like this. Price control that the legislature is imposing by law. Again, I think that this depends on the market. If the market would support a 30% increase, then why should the landlord not be able to exercise his rights to meet market price? So I don't understand how that could be retaliation either. I think this entire subclause D just needs to go. I mean, this is taken care of in any case in contract law. If you breach the contract in bad faith, why sure, you can sue. There's no problem with that. But we shouldn't be creating causes of action where it's inappropriate. The other, I was looking at, I guess we would call that the landlord-tenant law. That is it. I think it's 21. I think it's a 21 GCA section or chapter 48 there. Everything that we are doing in this law as regards to Weatherhead is already in the law. If the landlord doesn't provide the services, shelter, sound roof, sound walls, electricity, water, all the things that he has promised or she has promised to do within both the lease as well as Guam law, which requires that the landlord keep the property habitable, then the tenant has an action in breach of contract at a minimum, and perhaps a wrongful ejectment, all sorts of different things. But I guess my point is, well, I know my point is that all of these protections, which we are including, are already present in the law, and they would be, even if we hadn't enacted this tenant-landlord law that we have, they would still exist in just the common law right of breach of contract. So I don't think, while certainly the intent of this is good, the whole island suffers periodically from the results of typhoons, etc. This is a good thing to get weatherheads up and get the electricity flowing again throughout the island, but I don't see a necessity of creating this structure when it already exists within the law, statutorily and in the common law. And with that, and just reiterate my concerns about Section D, thank you very much, ma'am.
Your concerns about section, which section? D? E? D?
No, D, ma'am, Delta.
Okay. All right, on the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the bill? We're going to take a 1-minute recess. We're back from recess. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the bill? If not, then the sponsor may close on the bill. Senator Paris.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my colleagues for the debate. I think it only can make this bill much stronger, but if I can make an amendment to delete subsection D, which is subsection D on page 4. It starts out with the tenant has a cause of action. So that's to delete that section, which goes all the way down to the sentence, the amount of such damages that may be awarded is limited to actual damages and attorney's fees. So I would like to make that motion.
Is there any objection to allowing this amendment without it being in writing? If not, then we will proceed with the amendment. It's to delete subsection D. Is there anyone who'd like to speak on that amendment? If not, would you like to close on the amendment? On the amendment?
I'll waive the closing.
All right. So on the amendment to delete the entire subsection D on page 4, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. So the bill's been amended. Senator Parrish, you may now close on the bill.
I would also like to make another amendment to add co-sponsors. So I imagine Senator Tello Taitagui to be a co-sponsor to this bill.
On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries.
And if there's anyone else? No? Okay. All right, so yeah, I think this bill is still important because in some cases the leases may exempt landlords during an act of nature, which is why this bill is necessary. And also it provides clarification because there is a potential gap in the current tenant law. You know, the part, if you look at the different sections, there may be some gaps between the sections. And so when we're talking about, overcoming any kind of typhoons or natural disasters, I think it's critical that we have clarity in our laws so that we can build back better. And considering, what we went through Mawar, we definitely don't want to do that again. Don't want to have, anything that we can do as a community to speed up the process of restoring electricity back to our households. I think this is what the aim of this bill does. And it does it in a fair fashion as it is amended and substituted. So I thank my colleagues for their contribution to making this bill better. So at this time, I would like to make the motion to move amended bill 133-37 as amended by the committee, substituted on the floor, and further amended on the floor into the third reading file.
On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're now on Bill number 165-37, COR. Senator Sabina Perez, you are recognized.
I move to set that bill aside.
The motion to set it aside, is there any objection? Objection, seeing no objection, motion carries. 165. On Bill number 174-37, COR, is Senator Kanata.
Madam Speaker, if I may, to move to set aside this bill at the present time.
All right, there's a motion to set aside Bill number 174-37. Is there any objection to setting it aside? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're now on Bill number 194-37 LS. Senator Sabina Perez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to to accept the substitute version of Bill 194 onto the session floor, our session agenda.
It's being passed out right now, so we'll just wait for copies to be placed of the substitute bill. All right, copies have been passed. Senator Perez, you are recognized on Bill number 194-37 LS. No. Did you already make the motion? All right, so there's been a motion to accept this substitute version as substituted on the floor. Is there any objection to accepting this substituted version? Seeing no objection, that motion carries. Senator Perez, you may proceed on Bill number 194.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place Bill 194 as amended by the committee and substitute on the floor into the third reading, and I wish to discuss.
Please proceed.
Bill 194 aims to strengthen our tobacco control law by increasing fines and instituting stricter penalties for violators in order to limit access and to protect our youth from the harms that tobacco and nicotine can cause. Between 2018 to 2023, the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center and Department of Revenue and Taxation, through the signer compliance inspections, issued approximately 119 citations to businesses who sold tobacco and nicotine products to minors on Guam. Records show that 15 retailers have a history of 2 or more violations selling to underage youth. And in December 2023, it was found that one tobacco retailer was cited for its 4th offense within a 5-year period, resulting in a $10,000 fine and a revocation of their license. This vendor would not be eligible to apply for a license until 2026. The effects of these types of violations are far-reaching and significant, Reports show that nearly 1 in 5 Guam high school students tried smoking cigarettes for the first time before the age of 13, and approximately 11% of our middle school students tried smoking cigarettes before the age of 11. Guam youth have one of the highest rates of current use of e-cigarettes among countries in the Asia-Pacific region. 1 in 3 Guam high school and middle school students reported current use of electronic smoking devices. The State Epidemiological Outcomes Work Group, or SO, recognized that long-term use of tobacco and nicotine products increases the user's chance of developing chronic respiratory conditions, pulmonary conditions, heart disease, various cancers, increased risk of stroke and diabetes, and impaired brain development and cognitive functions. Lung cancer is a cause of 31% of cancer deaths in males and about 23% of cancer deaths in females in Guam. And these are highly preventable when proper policies in tobacco nicotine prevention and cessation are in place. In fact, tobacco nicotine control policies have shown to be closely associated with reductions in smoking and smokeless tobacco use overall. Bill 194-37 aims to hold violators more accountable through stricter penalties, such as suspension of license for 90 days for the first offense and 180 days for the second offense if selling to minors. Bill 194-37 would require the practice of carding before sale. Unlike in its current statute, there's a loophole. It also removes a potential loophole that would allow a retailer to reoffend outside of a 5-year period and still be counted as the first offense. For persons selling tobacco products or electronic cigarettes, fines would be increased for the first offense. For selling to minors, it would be up to $2,000 for the first offense. And that's increased from $1,000 to $2,000, so it doubles the fine. And for the second offense, it would be from $2,000 to $4,000. And for the third or more offense, it would be not less than $10,000 and not more than $20,000, and the license would be revoked. Bill 194-37 also proposes to distribute fines for illegal importation of tobacco products, with 50% being allocated to the Customs Local Forfeiture Account and 50% to the Youth Tobacco Prevention Fund to support enforcement and prevention efforts. And this was, we provided testimony from the Customs Director, Pareto, in support of this bill. Given the epidemic of electronic smoking use amongst our youth and the lasting effects on brain development and addiction, Bill 194 responds to this epidemic by limiting access to these highly addictive substances, which is one of many approaches that are needed. I want to thank my co-sponsors, Speaker Therese Terlahi and Senator Chris Barnett, for recognizing the need to be better stewards of our youth, and I humbly ask for my colleagues' support. Sizus Masi.
Sizus Masi, Senator. On the bill, is there anyone who'd like to speak on this bill? Senator Fisher, on the bill, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was looking at the penalty provisions, which are found at the bill's 6405. And this is on our page 7, that line 1. Upon the 3 or more violations, a person will get fined and the licensee shall be ineligible to apply for a new license for 10 years. You could punch a hole through this with a pea shooter. All I have to do is go to Rev and Tax and reincorporate under a different name. And now I'm a brand new licensee, and I can go out and get a license to sell tobacco. I just want my colleagues to be aware that this is a bit of a paper tiger. It'll be very easy to drive around this. I think that it might, the authors might consider making this personal to the shareholders or the people who incorporate, so they can't. So we circumvent their ability to drive around this by, today I'm ABC Corp, tomorrow I'm EFG Corp, and I get a license. It is a good thing, of course, to discourage in every way possible the use of tobacco products, and I commend my friend Senator Perez for outlining the tremendous damage it does in the billions of dollars in our country and many billions throughout the world because of this substance. And so our attempt to control it and keep it out of the hands of the young is a wonderful thing. It's a very wonderful thing. I think that's what one of our premier duties in this body is, to protect vulnerable communities such as the young from harm and from, this insidious poison that is present and currently legal to sell, rather through e-cigarettes or cigarettes in general. It is, one thing is encouraging is I think that the use of combustibles on island has decreased sharply. Your average cigarette, your cigars, those things are just not that popular anymore, and they've become socially unacceptable. You can't smoke in a restaurant and so forth, and that also discourages use. I hope there is a way, I think there is a way to attack this problem more substantively. I appreciate the taxing, I appreciate the penalties, all of these things which cause discouragement. Unfortunately, the war against nicotine and cancer-causing agents continues, and it doesn't appear that we're winning it. It's like the battle with methamphetamine. One step forward and 3 steps back. As my friend Senator Perez mentioned, it's increasingly present in all of our schools. It is being used freely, essentially, in many of our schools because it doesn't smell like tobacco. I'm referring to vapes, of course. It doesn't smell like tobacco when it is exhaled. It smells like, fruit or something pleasant. So the kids are just not getting busted like they used to. And they know it. They're smarter than we are. And they've figured a workaround on this, too. So we're going to have to figure out a way to entirely suppress the e-cigarette industry. I would ask my colleagues to consider that. The origin of the illness is in its distribution and its presence. It's certainly not the fault of adults or parents, rather. They're not feeding their kids poison. But anyway, congratulations, Senator Perez and others, on bringing this forward. I would just, again, caution or ask for reflection on how we can keep licensees from, just playing a game of 3-card Monte and just shifting names and starting their nefarious business all over again. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the bill? Senator Brown, on the bill, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I certainly appreciate the introduction Senator Sabina has with this bill, and certainly the attempts to try and ensure that proper processes are followed to minimize the opportunity for our young people that are not of age to get their hands on these tobacco and nicotine products. And I think it's important, that we remember that the issue of concern also is it's the tobacco with the nicotine that's affecting our youth. And the fact that after so many years of awareness, you would think that we would have less issues with our young people coming up, and yet this is still a growing problem. Certainly the penalties are put in place in this legislation for the businesses that are involved in selling these products, but our bigger challenge is how do we address the fact that our children are still getting a hold of these products? Not necessarily at the point of sale, but certainly somehow, some way, they're getting it at home or they're getting it among each other. And how do we address that? That's a challenge as well, considering the fact that we've seen the issue come up with our schools, where they've confiscated these items from students and are like, what do we do with the collection? Because it is such a prevalent problem among our young people, and we need to continue to get that awareness out there. But then like I said, how do we address the issues in the household? How do we address some of these things that are beyond our capabilities as legislators to simply legislate, because it is such a prevalent problem, along with the other issues that we have of drugs in our community, and certainly the challenges we have now with the methamphetamine problem that we have. That's something that I know we're all concerned about. But those dynamics are happening out there regardless of what laws that we put in place. So at least to the degree we can address this for those that are providing the sale of these items, the priority obviously is to protect our young people from getting a hold of it. Adults, this is their choice to be responsible for what they consume. I mean, I myself am a lifelong non-smoker. I have no interest in cigarettes or vaping. I have just don't. I don't drink coffee. I've just never had a taste for it. But again, I think awareness is very important, and also ensuring that the penalties are put in place so that the violations can be addressed. I appreciate the point that Senator Fisher brought up is, if they can simply go in and reincorporate and go back out there, hopefully we can identify and track these individuals down so that they're not continuing to be irresponsible in our community and harming our young people. But there's obviously a need for continued awareness. We take for granted our health till we don't have it. And certainly when you're young, you think you're invincible, you can do and be everything, and then you find out sometimes that these things catch up with you. What they choose to do when they're older, it's a little more challenging, but certainly for the time that they're underage, we want to ensure that our young people are protected, and to the degree that this legislation can provide that, I support it. But our challenge is still out there with the other things that our legislative arms cannot reach. So with that, Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this bill.
Thank you, Senator Brown. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the bill? On the bill?
Thank you. I know that Speaker was wanting to speak, but I'm going to go ahead and recognize, thank you, Madam Speaker, Minority Leader, Senator Blas, on the main motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I can appreciate the intent of the legislation, and quite honestly, I agree with the need and the necessity of it. But in the spirit of wanting to make sure that this can hold water, as was mentioned, and the concern brought by the gentleman from Talapofo, with regard to the loophole that can recognize that within the penalty phase and construction in the bill, specifically on page 4, it starts obviously with a notwithstanding provision with regard to the kind of monetary penalties that can be provided to violations or to committing these acts. This obviously misdemeanors in itself. And while it can be covered with the notwithstanding provision, I do have a question that I'd like to be able to pose to the author, if she may yield to my inquiry on with regard to the penalties, the monetary penalties imposed as indicated in lines 3, 6, and 8, how did she get to these figures? How did we get to $1,000, $2,000, and $4,000, and up to $10,000?
Senator Paris, would you like to yield?
Yes, I do yield to the question.
Thank you.
So in Guam Behavioral Health Wellness testimony, they reported that 15 retailers are repeat offenders in selling tobacco products to youth. And they state, we do not have an account of reasons as to why this is so. But we know in prevention practice is that such violations may be attributed to two possible reasons. First, the retail store staff are not adequately trained in the law to card individuals. And the second possible reason is that the penalties do not outweigh the potential income they can collect if they are not caught. And so that is what informed me into increasing the fines to deter, to act as a deterrent, because currently the fines are not deterring these retailers from continuing to sell. So this would hopefully eliminate that incentive, and that's the reason to it's basically doubling the fines.
Minority Leader, does that suffice?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I bring this up because, based on our laws, misdemeanors are crimes punishable for fines of up to $1,000. And while in the case of, in the bill, in the proposed legislation for the first offense here, it'll be a fine of $1,000. But when you look at the second and the third, $2,000, and then up to $10,000, up to $10,000, on our Guam law, that's the kind of fine that you can provide or get when the individual commits a felony of the first or second degree. There's a big difference between a felony and a misdemeanor. And I understand with regard to we wanted to bring the penalties up, or the monetary penalties up, because the stores do make the money. But when you're looking at the rest of Guam law and how it could, granted, there's a notwithstanding provision, for these penalties. But when your offenses or your monetary penalties go way outside the realm of what a monetary penalty should be for that particular crime, so much so that then it elevates that penalty similar to that of a first-degree felony. It's not that I'm against it. I just want to make sure that it'll hold water. Because as I look at this, next question is, who's going to impose this? Who's going to make that determination of between $4,000 and $10,000? And what will be that justification?
Senator Paris, would you like to answer that question?
you've got a gap in your third offense of a penalty that can be imposed between $4,000 and $10,000. Who's going to make that determination, and how's that determination going to be made?
Minority Leader, is that an inquiry
That's
to
a
the
good
author?
inquiry to the author.
Senator Perez, would you like to answer the question?
Yes, I do. Thank you for the question. And so I just want to also provide information. The reason why that notwithstanding is to ensure that, I know what the retiring speaker or the person proposing the question was asking, that it's not aligned with what in regards to a misdemeanor, but I think that that's the reason for that notwithstanding clause, is to allow for this to these fines to exist. And we did pass another bill in this body that included this exact same language to allow for a $20,000 fine. So yeah, I guess it was inspired by that. But in regards to who enforces it, the Attorney General is the one that would enforce this, and would have to make those considerations. Normally, the number of times the offense is done is probably what would help make that decision. But again, this is in a court of law, so it would really eventually be up to the judge to decide the amount.
Again, I ask these questions not to, I just want to make sure there's clarity with why this is being set out the way it is. I recognize that notwithstanding, I recognize that with the use of that, of that provision, you can depart from what is already existing in law, or you propose to depart from what is existing in law. But then when your departure takes you into areas where there it's penalties similar to greater crimes, we just got to be very careful. Now, I'm not going to claim to know, the legal system, the way it functions and everything. It's just, for me, it just doesn't look kosher. Okay. I caution that. Does it mean that I don't like the bill? No, it doesn't. I just want to make sure that what we pass, when we pass it, I don't see any reason why this bill is not going to pass. But it doesn't come back to us, or it doesn't come back to us and say, this is unenforceable. And then where are we at? We're back to square one. So with that, ma'am, thank you very much for the opportunity.
You're very welcome, Minority Leader. Speaker Therese Terlahi on the main motion. You are recognized.
Thank you. I'd like to rise in support of this bill and thank the author for allowing me to be a co-sponsor on this bill, and to thank those who testified in support of this bill. We spoke earlier today about radiation and how it causes cancer, and how our people have been impacted by that. We talked about contamination, like Agent Orange, and the diseases that are caused by exposure to that. A lot of those exposures we were not able to control. But this exposure of our children to tobacco, all of us on Guam, should do our very best to control, to protect them while their brains are still developing. So what I appreciate about the bill is that it takes our current prohibitions against tobacco, already in law, and adds to almost all of those provisions or prohibitions Where it says tobacco, they now add vaping, or how do they say it? Electronic cigarettes. So I appreciate that, because when electronic cigarettes first came out, they were described as harmless or less harmless, and I think everyone now, even those who are in the business, admit, and the studies show very clearly, that they are not harmless. And in some cases, for young people, the impacts are very severe, including death. And the other thing I appreciate about this bill is it not just added electronic cigarettes into the prohibitions, it took those penalties that we currently put on violations of our tobacco laws, particularly on those who are importing, distributing, selling these products. And quite remarkably, the bill, at the very minimum, doubled those penalties. In some instances, this bill quadrupled the penalties. Significant, especially because the studies show that penalties deter, or financial penalties will deter the retailers or the importers or the transporters. Of course, this puts an increased duty on the Department of Revenue and Taxation, but one that I believe that they are willing to adopt. Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness as well is willing to take this on. They are the ones who are assisting in the enforcement of the tobacco laws as they stand today. So I'm hoping that this will deter as well. That this bill altogether, and I appreciate the comments that have been previously made regarding, our penalties. They're not perfect, because perhaps a company who has been found in violation 3 times and whose license is supposed to be removed might be able to come back as a new company. Yes, unfortunately, that's the case with the existing laws now. Not just this, but some other violations of different laws. So this doesn't address that loophole, but it makes, for vaping products, sales to minors, it makes it consistent with our current law for tobacco sales. That's the same with the range of fines. Our current law for tobacco sales has a range of fines, in some instances, no less than this, no more than this. That range should be determined by the Attorney General. But in most cases in this bill, so I see no issue with that, because it's consistent, again, with our current tobacco laws. And the AGs have not testified as to any problem in determining what that amount's going to be. But what I again, note and like is that these ranges are now much higher. And in fact, I think the ranges have been reduced, and they no longer says in the bill no more than $1,000. It says $1,000. It's very definite, it's concrete, and I think that's what we need to deter. To be definite, concrete about what the penalty is going to be. There's no getting out of it. Minimums are set where there is a range. I only really saw one range in this whole bill. The rest are all very concrete penalties. So I very much agree with the philosophy behind it, the goal behind it. I believe that all those who testify were in favor of the bill. And with some exceptions of, as to the language, which I believe the sponsor has addressed. And so, again, in full support of this bill. I thank the sponsor for being bold and really coming out with these huge penalties, trying to make this significant impact, and doing it in a timely manner while these studies have, been presented to us, while the smoking rates and the electronic cigarette rates on Guam have been put forth for all to see. There's no debate anymore. We can't hide from the facts that at a minimum, they're quoting 1 in 3 high school students is vaping, and 1 in 3 middle school students reporting current use. 1 in 3 middle school students. So I'm all for this bill. I'm all for the penalties. I hope the enforcement efforts are going to go through, and I thank those who are helping us in the enforcement of these tobacco against sale of tobacco products, electronic cigarette products to our minors. Situs Masi, Madam Speaker.
Buen provecho, Speaker Terlai. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Senator Chris Barnett, I will acknowledge you at this time.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I commend the author for this. Again, with the author, she routinely finds the glaring holes in our existing statutes and plugs them up with some great legislation. And, as the chair of education, the retiring speaker is absolutely right. Vape is a scourge, not unlike the scourge of crystal methamphetamine for our adult population with the kids. GDOE has seized so many vape devices that they had to consult the Guam Environmental Protection Agency as to how to dispose of them because they're an environmental hazard with the batteries that they have in them. And so the 1 in 3 data, I don't know if that was from last year or the year before, but, unfortunately, I feel like that might have increased. I go around to the schools a lot, and we just did a bunch of career days, and I always, the kids, they always want me to come back and play guitar, but no matter what school I'm going to, I always make them promise I'm only going to come back if you listen to your teacher, concentrate on your studies, don't bully, and don't vape. So again, I commend the author for adding the e-cigarettes, the vape, nicotine, whatever you guys want to call it. We know what it is, for adding it to these penalties. And I too, like the retiring speaker, support the healthiness of these penalties and the loftiness of them. And I think that it definitely sends a message to those who sell vape. We saw that the Sinar report showed that there was actually vape devices getting sold to underage consumers. And so I, again, rise in support of this measure, and I ask that my colleagues do the same. Situs Masi, Madam Speaker.
Situs Masi, Senator Barnett. Is on the bill, Senator Taitagui, you're recognized.
Situs Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I definitely stand in favor of anything that's going to increase fines to send a clear message out there that, if you break the law, then now there's an even more higher constringent fine that will be imposed on you, and that we're not messing around. But we have to realize that some of the comments that were made earlier, that, and we all agree that these should not be given to underage individuals. And we're doing everything we can. And I think there's other legislation that's going to come forward with regards to advertisement, that I stand in full support of, especially, you're seeing it on the billboard, but I'll wait until that comes up. But I also want to mention that some of the data that was provided to us was data that indicated if like 1 out of 3, and that information was done in the question of, have you ever tried vape, or do you continue to vape, or smoke? So it was almost disingenuous because many of them have said that they had tried it one time, but they're not vaping. They just tried it. So the data that we're getting is not accurate. Second, that those the 15 that was mentioned that they sanctioned for distributing to minors for these vapes, they came from retail stores. 15, all of them retail stores, and not a vape shop. We know that vape shops are very stringent on their rules and regulations. They have cameras everywhere. They ensure that they have the ID and identification when giving out any kind of product for sale. And it's unfortunate because we have so many penalties on these retailers, which I think is justly so. But I just wish that we can have some penalties on parents, who we found who actually purchased some of these things to give to their kids. In fact, sometime there was a comment that was made during the public hearing that they literally saw a young student, middle school, vaping in the car with the parent. We need to come up with penalties for these parents. I mean, there's something in the law that says if a parent gives a can of beer to their child, is that okay? Should that parent be penalized? Or even child abuse? Yes, absolutely. So what about when it comes to cigarettes or vaping? Is there a law that would penalize that parent? There should be. We really need to continue to look at this situation here when it comes to combustible products that can harm individuals. But we also need to look at those types of mechanisms that are used to help people wean themselves off of nicotine, the tobacco, and it's working many a times. Janela Carrera came and testified on one of the public hearings that actually vaping helped her wean herself off because it's a gradual step and it's more affordable than some of the patches or the gum. But I'm sure that we're going to continue to address this issue. And I thank the author for moving in this direction, and I'll hope I can help when comes time to providing these penalties against those parents who allow their children to be in harm's way. It's just as bad as drinking alcohol. So I thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill. All right, if there's no one else on the bill, the sponsor may close on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think it's important to restate the record that it is accurate that 1 in 3 of our middle school and 1 in 3 high school students are current users, and I can find the citation for that in the documentation. But I think it's really important to recognize that this is an epidemic. And looking at the research too, in just a 2 years amount of time, from 2017 to 2019, the increase, it jumped from 1 in 4 to 1 in 3. And so that is an alarming rate and something in which we need to respond to. This bill specifically addresses limiting access, which is one of the important practices in tobacco and nicotine prevention use amongst youth. Of course, there are other measures that are needed to address this epidemic. And in my discussions with Department of Education, they're definitely looking at those options and how to address youth use of nicotine products. So what this bill does, it really holds accountable those violators. If you are a business in good standing, this does not affect you. It affects those businesses that are breaking the law. And so it is important that our fines address or create a deterrence to help stop access to these products. So some of the findings that were reported in the SO report is that 47.7% were not prevented from buying tobacco products because of their age. And this cannot happen anymore. 22.9% of current cigarette smokers bought cigarettes from a store, shop, gas station, flea market, or night market. And these were minors. So data has shown that tobacco use drops with the enactment of stricter policies, and Bill 194 is one measure in a series of measures before this body that addresses the epidemic of electronic smoking device use amongst our youth in order to protect them from the harms of tobacco nicotine. Especially at a young age, the youth, they're still developing, their brains are still developing, and it's been shown that substance use at that age has more long-lasting impacts, as well as they're more vulnerable to addictions. And so it's really critical that we close the gaps in our current laws, in addition to creating more laws to address this issue. I thank my colleagues for this debate, and I know there's more work to be done, and I am committed to doing that work. I humbly ask for my colleagues' support on this very important measure, along with other measures to come. Situas Masi, and I move to place this bill, 194, as amended by the committee, substituted on the floor, to the third reading file.
On that motion to place the bill as substituted on the third reading file, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, that motion carries. All right, colleagues, thank you. With that, we're going to recess until 9 a.m. tomorrow. We've got 2 more measures on our agenda. Recess until 9 a.m.